Welcome, everyone, to Claigan's webinar on PFAS reporting. I'm Bruce Calder. I'm the VP of Consulting Services here. To start everything off, I start with a cat cartoon. Scott Metzger, I love his stuff. This is very much like my cats. They knock the mug off, but they won't take out the whole coffee pot. They're not a barbarian. Um, Especially if they want food, they get my attention, especially going across my dresser and just knocking stuff off. Okay, so I'm talking Minnesota PFAS. Shouldn't be shocking considering what the actual topic title is or the webinar title is. However, I'm going to talk scope and deadline, extensions such that they are intentionally added, what the criteria is there, and then it is still pretty hand wavy. Product grouping, component grouping, PFAS function, fees, waivers such that they are, due diligence, and a practical approach around the whole thing. So how do I do this in practice? I am going to then go to New Mexico PFAS because New Mexico PFAS has more modern details and definitions of where these legislations are going. And you get a better idea of what PFAS are going to be regulated in the future and which are not. And New Mexico PFAS gives you a much better idea of which ones are going to be regulated going forward and which ones are not. I'll talk a little bit, very small amount about our life cycle analysis part. A lot of people didn't know we do it. It's an outgrowth or basically a skill developed from the Canadian Plastic Registry work, et cetera. Turns out that once we can get the material side down, the rest of the LCA is pretty straightforward. And then Q&A. So there'll be lots of questions to answers. Now, of course, the afternoon, folks, you get the new improved version where it's great to get feedback from hundreds of companies and then make some small adjustments, especially about some of the details around fees. There's some hand wavy sections in here that the law itself is very vague on. They do have a statement of reasons, which gives you an idea of what they really meant when they did or did not write something, which does help a bit. So it's a really good contribution by the world at large. And there's some adjustments on some of the confusing parts around fees. What's said in the law and what they're trying to do aren't actually the same thing. So we'll see how it ends up. So we're the world leader in PFAS and products, especially on the technical side. We do lots of legal defenses these days for PFAS, for old legacy stuff, which we basically always win. We know a lot more now. Now there's test data. A lot of what people thought or the plaintiffs thought going in is completely wrong. Not in really, everybody's talking about toxicology and danger. I'm like, no, I can tell from the test results, they're not the source. The defendant's not the source of the problem. This is why. So we did submissions to the UN Stockholm Convention, which is changing some of the PFOA exemptions. EU, we submitted derogations on restrictions for industry, which has helped put a stall on that. We submitted quite a bit in PFOA to the Canadian government, where it really needs to be done. Definitely still is apparel, especially professional apparel. ICHEMS, we did the same sort of thing in Australia. They got they probably some funky Australian world word for like really big monsoons there. And there's a good reason why, the poor police person at the down traffic light has to have waterproof clothing. So it's a big, big difference. As a consumer, I must say, I do actually go look up a professional PFAS stuff. Way better clothing. It's not the reason people are being poisoned. The main replacement is a major allergen. It's way worse. We have a chem lab. We know better. When they're complaining about, this school has that in their water, it's not from your products. It's from different sources. And you can tell from the test data where it's actually from. And it's not for basically anybody who has to register. A few exceptions. It's really neat. Yeah. So by the way, if you ever like right now, it's like a name brand Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex today you get as a consumer is not the Gore-Tex yesterday. It's now expanded polyethylene. It's so. If you want the good stuff, EPTFE, you look professional Gore-Tex and it's different. So you can still get professional level gear as a normal person, which actually is much better beating. And there's still some allowances, professional gear. They're trying to close those loopholes, which is a dumb idea because the poor police person sitting at the traffic light has every right to have clothing that doesn't leak through. And the new replacements, are much worse at it. They don't bead as well and they kind of soak through. And they're also full of major allergens. Or you take a case of polyurethane, it's based in cyanide. It produces a lot worse chemicals than any of your C8 fluorocoated stuff does. So a lot of good reason for that. EPA side, we submitted, of course, a lot of same stuff. We submitted Europe to the EPAs, put on record, and that's helping the conversation we'll talk about when we get to New Mexico about fluoropolymers. Currently unavoidable uses. We've submitted previously to Minnesota and Maine. And we also have a laboratory ourselves, which, when we're saying things, it's a big difference. We're saying things and we have test capability. Um, what was in products 2 years ago is very different than now, especially around additives and degradation products. It's very, very different, especially on the PFAS side. Um, so that really helps a lot. We can see what today looks like, not what the government has copy pasted from each other for the last decade. What is today? And it's very different from what they know. Sidetrack, don't forget about the plastic registry. Consumer side, electronics and packaging due September this year in Canada. It's a big deal. It takes a while to do it. It's fairly work intensive. It's just there's a lot of pieces to it. It takes time. So we're the world leader in it by far. Google it, plastic registry, Canada, we're the leader. There's not any comparison. The deadline for consumer products is September this year. We're really, really good at it. We do it for a huge range of products. We can help you make it a lot easier. Even if you think you have a lot of the data, we can help adjust it for the end. We can be very, very helpful. Back to PFAS, which again, Jenny said, Minnesota PFAS is kind of a hint that I was going to go just drive off the road for a little bit and go for a wander. And here we are. So, and by the way, anytime you see that blue with the underline, it's to a link. So that's the rule. The rule is what the law is. There's some caps in it. They're like, and you'll get to that. And we'll get to that. I'm saying, it's not really clear here, or there's two different interpretations. It's a problem. So PFAS reporting is due January 1st, 2026. All products in Minnesota in scope. There is a more detailed statement of reasons here. So for the law to pass, they have to publish also what the reasons for all the bits were. The reasoning gives you almost like a guidance, a little more what they were thinking. Because when you actually read the text, what they were thinking, what's written in the text are not 100% the same, especially around fees. What they meant and what's written in the text are not that similar. By the way, this is still a proposal such that it is. I'll talk about later. It's a proposal, but it's the final. We'll talk about the details. Exemptions. There are a few exemptions. Products which federal law requires PFAS, so you need Viton for an oil pipeline, and the federal law says you have to use Viton, then fine. But it has to say you have to use it. It's not like, hey, I'm a medical device under FDA, I'm out. I'm like, oh, it has to say it's only the PTFE or whatever that says you have to use. Firefighting foam, which is the cause of most of the problems in Minnesota, is not in this. Used products. One of my favorites is they've had multiple things say this school or that school has PFAS in it and they're blaming this, then raincoats and whatever. And you can tell from the test results, it's the same thing that's in the lake upstream from them. Their well is just getting water from that upstream lake. And the thing getting to that lake is a firefighting foam. That's not products. They have different chemicals in them, so that it's once you have a good water test data, you know what's coming from, and it's not you guys. So it is interesting. I mean, definitely inside the statement of reasons, they'll say multiple sites had these problems. I'm like, yes, but I can actually tell you the multiple sites what it is, and it isn't these people. Especially waived agricultural products. So if you've got a waiver to use like a fertilizer, it's got PFAS in it for some reason, like a surfactant, you get it waived that way. It's kind of obscure. And then products under classified information to the US. Okay, you make missiles, fine. They're not in here, fine. Will these PFAS? Sure. Most electronics, for example, use PFAS, especially if they're high temperature, like your router. So if you're in an office right now, the hottest thing in the office is not normally the furnace or anything similar. It's actually the wireless router. If you take an infrared camera around your office, it's going to be the router. That's super hot. It'll be hotter than the insides of your coffee machine. It's really, really warm. So it uses high temperature fluorowire. Who's in scope? Everyone. A few exemptions again. Products which require PFAS under federal law, firefighting foam, used products, especially special waived agricultural products, and products under classified information to the US. Responsible party, the brand owner of the final product sold in Minnesota. It's different. It's not the importer, it's the actual brand owner. So if it's not the retailer's responsibility unless the brand owner is not in the US, then it's the importer. Unless there's a written agreement for another company to report instead. So you can shift the responsibility to someone else, except for you both had to have a report anyways. So for example, imagine you use some company's connectors that has PFAS in it, and they're reporting those connectors already. You can report, I don't have to report those connectors because they're reporting it, and then report to Minnesota a link to the other company's report. or you can just report them. So there's a bunch of obscurity in here. So default, it's the brand owner, unless there's a basically the brand owner doesn't exist in the US. So again, the default for most products is a brand owner. Unless the brand owner doesn't exist in the US, then it's the importer. You can have written agreement between two companies for them to report, but they actually have to say who they're reporting for, and they end up paying fees anyways. So you can, and I'm not exactly sure why, but you can. I think it's unnecessarily complicated. That's normally a Canadian thing. And Minnesota borders us, so I guess sometimes they get the Canadian thing of unnecessarily complicated. They get mosquitoes, so and snow, so half half of us right there. Reporting deadline. Again, January 1st, 2026. Unless you successfully obtain an extension. You're like, oh, extension. I just feel like a seal. No, it's not as easy as the Canadian one. Requesting the extension must be made 30 days in advance, December 1st, 2025. It's a maximum 90 days extension. It's not a huge amount. The extension request has to be quite detailed, actually. Your company and contact information. Okay, well, that's not very surprising. The reason for extension request, including a detailed explanation of the circumstances that prevent timely submission. Like, why can't you do this? And documentation that substantiates your need. You can't just say, I have it. And your association can't ask for it. You have to ask for it. And the plan for completion. Like, how are you going to meet the new deadline? If we give you 90 days, so are you just going to ask for it again in 90 days, which is pretty common and for a number of industries? They're had enough of that. Oh, yeah, and you have to pay a $300 fee. So there's that part. So you have to provide a lot more details, and you have to provide a $300 fee for extension. Lots of fun to pay for all the churn you're making them do. So you can likely get it if you meet all these criteria and you pay a $300 fee, but you have to show them like, this is where I'm at right now, and this is what we're doing, and here's my plan to meet that details, and here's the $300. Okay, so scope is intentionally added, which is very hand wavy. And I mentioned before, there's the law, and there's a link to it earlier, and there's the statement of reasons. Statement of reasons is worthwhile revisiting for this kind of thing to see what they meant. Intentionally added is a bit open-ended and says a manufacturer or group of manufacturers of a product sold, offered for sale, or distributed to the state must submit a report for each product component that contains intentionally added PFAS. Practical definition is there in purpose and has a function. You usually don't put it there unless it's a function. Now, it could be a function to make it. That actually counts. Like emulsion polymerization aids count because they help make it. But it does include degradation products. So if the fluoroacrylic copolymer coating I was talking about on the police uniform, and if you use the C8 version, it can degrade to absolutely minuscule little amounts of PFOA, but there's some there. Modern technology, you can measure it, but it involves extremely modern technology. That's not included. The fluoroacrylic coating is, in which in many cases does not even have a CAS number, but the degradation product is not. But if you use the polymerization aid, which Viton used to use a fluorinated sulfonated salt, it's quite a complicated molecule, as a polymerization aid, that was used to make it, and it does count. However, they have lots of comments about detection limits, and if you can't actually see it, then that's fair too. And it really should have no contribution. It really doesn't serve a function. Now, if intentionally added means it's there on purpose, if it doesn't have a function, and for fluoropolymers, it's usually 1,000 ppm. We've got enough test data. Fluoropolymers under 150 ppm really have no reason to be there. They're not a function. It's a contamination or something else, not intentional. Fluorosalts, they can be there intentionally, like emulsion polymerization aids, but they're only in other fluoropolymers. So you get the fluoropolymer aids. So it usually works out pretty well. It is a very complicated thing. Polymers are very different than salts. Grade 11 chemistry didn't cover polymers very well, and grade 12. So a lot of what other people know in the world doesn't extend well to polymers. It's very different. Also, the naming conventions are very different. It's much more complicated. Polymers also get named in many ways. The polymer might have a name, or you can name the polymer based on the ingredients. It is a more complicated world. Okay. Data fields. Pretty well identical for what we've been doing for years. We're going to tighten up the function descriptions. You do it by product or product grouping. So basically, we'll explain the product grouping in a moment. Product identification information. So how do you identify these products? HS code, UPC code. You have lots of options. And then in it, you're only reporting because they have PFAS containing components. So then you report the components that have PFAS in it. And you don't report the number of like 6 or 7, you just report the type. So we have, flame retardant plastic with PTFE. And you can group the components together if they have the same substance. And so that's one of the reasons why we have a project ongoing is we're helping with Minnesota PFAS submission. We'll also have some common description of component types that have PFAS and the function of PFAS in there. So industry can standardize what they're saying and try to say the same thing. And it's a lot better if everybody says the same thing in a good, accurate way. It makes advocacy a lot easier. And it's also, if you're wrong like everybody else, which is probably the best way to be wrong in a brand new regulation. Concentration ranges, it's a pull down menu. It's like under 100 ppm, like 100 ppm to 1000 ppm, 1000 to 1%, so on and so forth, 1% to 10%, and that kind of thing. So ranges, which makes it a lot easier to group components because not whether it's 4.5% and 6%, they're between 1 and 10%. So a lot easier to group. PFAS function, that's one where it's not clear. We'll talk about later whether it's a single word like lubricant or flame retardant, or do you have to put some description? It looks like description makes sense. However, we're going to have to go through a statement of reasons because the actual law has no text on it. And then the manufacturer's contact information. Similar's product. I wrote that myself. I'm going to fix that on the version you get. By the way, anybody who registered receive a copy of these slides, hopefully not with similars in it because that's special. I was focusing on a lot of the technical stuff to make sure the technical stuff's right. The grammar stuff didn't seem to make the second cut here. Similar products can be grouped into a report. So criteria for grouping products. So you don't have to make a report for every product. And it's not clear in the law whether you have to pay a fee per product grouping, per report, or is it per manufacturer. Statement of reason says per manufacturer. Law says per report, which you can only put one product grouping in a report. That's one of the complications. So, by the way, this is still sort of a proposal. You can still put comments on it till the 21st. Definitely recommend it. We're definitely going to submit some things on the fees, for example, and many other things, where it's basically okay. You say in statements of reason it's $1,000 per manufacturer, and then you say it's per report. Can you have multiple product groupings in a report? Because that's kind of important. Most of the companies have multiple product types that have PFAS. Criteria group components have to have the same PFAS. So if you group products together, they have to have the same PFAS containing components. It doesn't mean they have to have so-and-sos. They have to have we have PTFE as a dielectric. We have FEP as an insulator on high temperature wires. So they have the same use. And they have to have the same PFAS, like FEP, same concentration ranges. Like the FEP in the wire will be, between 10 and 30% of the weight. And the function, it's electrical insulator. It's a high temperature electrical insulator. So you don't want to say just electrical insulation because then, well, everybody's like, you could use PVC. Like PVC can't survive the temperature your router or your stove handles. You have to use higher temperature. And that's why you use FEP. Why don't you use PTFE? Because PTFE is too rigid and you have to use FEP. Oh, so you can't use Teflon. FEP is Teflon. No, PTFE is Teflon. No, it's also Teflon. So another funny thing people have trouble with, and it even causes me problems a lot when I'm talking about it, Teflon's a brand name. It's like Kleenex. PTFE is a Teflon, FEP is a Teflon. So when somebody says, hey, this is a Teflon wire, it says it's more likely to be FEP than PTFE. They're very similar, but they're actually different polymers. Bit of chemistry stuff. That's why it's a bit complicated. Somebody's like, oh, I have Teflon in it. I'm like, is it FEP or PTFE? They're like, it's Teflon. And no, but it's a name brand. It usually means two different chemicals. It can be more, but it's usually one of two. So it has the same basic form and function. Group stuff together, and I'll show lots of examples in a moment, the same basic form and function. And it has any other qualities, mostly superficial, and most importantly, don't impact the composition of the intentionally added PFAS. So the products do basically the same thing, and the components with PFAS in it are the same, and the PFASs are the same. Then they can be grouped together because it doesn't really change their knowledge base. What does that mean in practice? Groupings will help out a lot with companies. Because in the law, the $1,000 fee looks to be a report. But the intention in their statement of reasons is $1,000 per manufacturer, which it definitely is not anyways, because if a manufacturer report on your own, and then you also you point to somebody else's data for, say, one component or something like that, it's another $1,000. I don't think they thought all that through. And it says one report has a product in it or product grouping. Okay, what if you have multiple product groupings because they have different PFAS containing components, which is pretty normal. What does that mean? And so it's not written. The law itself, the notice is not very good at that. The statement of reasons says what the intention was, but it's not what's written. So that's a bit of a problem. So when in doubt, the law says it's $1,000 per report. However, if you look at the statement of reasons, page 40, and the hyperlink will go to it, it says it's supposed to be $1,000 per manufacturer. So is it? And they don't agree. The grouping criteria in practice is the same PFAS containing components. So you can group products together if they have the same PFAS containing components in the product. All the PFAS declarable components must be the same. No, they don't have to be like, hey, Joe's one, though. They have to be the way you define the component, like we have PTFE in flame retardant plastic. Same concentration, between 0.1 and 1%. PTFE in plastic, you could group that component, and then they have, say, FEP as insulator and high temperature wire. It doesn't matter how many. So a lot of times when you're doing all this minutia and data gathering, you're not going to use almost any of it. It's kind of a waste of time and expense. What you need the actual upper level processing. So you have this data, and that's where I help a lot of companies who have lots of data. It's mostly not very useful. It's then we have to convert it into something kind of handy, like the actual declaration. So all the PFAS declarable components must be the same PFAS, same concentration range, and same function. So it has to be electrical insulator or flame retardant or lubricant or whatever, anti-friction. It has to have the same function. They're like, well, sometimes PTFE's in there as a flame retardant and lubricant. As long as it's PTFE and it can do both, that's a combined function. It can do two functions at once. Then the products can be grouped as the same product function. This might not make a lot of sense. Practical approach is they have at least the same customs. Customs code's a good argument on saying why we're putting them together. So if they're the same customs code and they have the same PFAS containing components, then grouping is a lot easier. Example, can you put all refrigerators together? Well, it makes sense. If all the PFAS groups are the same, some people say, hey, there's different, if you go down the customs code, there are different ones for one, door refrigerator, two-door refrigerators. They're all basically the same, they're cooling, and if they have the same PFAS containing components, you're not reporting how many anyways, you're not reporting volumes, you're just reporting why they're there. So for example, again, it have to be the same component type. So again, the component groups, you can put the refrigerators together as long as the PFAS containing component types are the same. Not the number of. One is 5, one is 7, it doesn't matter. Like if one has 7 components with PTFEs of flame retardant plastic and one is 9, that has no effect because you're not reporting numbers. You're reporting I have PTFE, it's there as a flame retardant, and it's a flame retardant plastic. That's the component type. They have to have the same PFAS function, the same concentration ranges, which is normally why it's there. It's in most time why you have PFAS is not because you're doing something unique. You're doing it, using it for the same reason everybody else uses it for that function. So it's a pretty common thing, which is a very common situation in similar electronics where the components you're using in different products, they might be from different people, but the same 4 or 5 reasons component that you have PFAS in it. You're normally not doing different things. No, the number of components, weight of components, sales volumes are not part of the reporting requirement in Minnesota. You're like, what? I have to do it for the other guys in the US and Canada. Yes, it's not part of this one. In Canada, it's barely. Because you don't care about the number of components, weighted components. You just care about the concentration rate, component type, PFAS, component type, concentration range, and function. Not how many times is there, not how many you sold. Just the PFAS concentration range and function. And that's key for how you put components together. Is you want to, and that's one reason why we're having a project is anybody doing Minnesota PFAS, we're circulating function descriptions to submit. So companies have the same one. It makes it harder to pick at somebody versus everybody else. It also makes advocacy so much easier, where basically your association or interested party is not working on, 200 different company submissions. They're going, okay, we're using the same one. We're just working on these 12. And that's the 12 uses we want to keep. And so they can focus their efforts to keeping your 12 uses or whichever. Which a lot of this is much the pain in the butt to reporting. You want to report accurately, so it's less likely you get restricted in the future. By reporting, you're so much more difficult to restrict the PFAS in your products. It's so much harder. So there is advantage to reporting and reporting accurately because, especially for stuff you're going to use, you just don't want to have to redesign your products for no good reason. by reporting if, unless it's a very dangerous chemical, which most of these are not, the chance of regulation is very small. And I'll show New Mexico later, and I'll show you which way it's going. Okay, product grouping. Can you put all the refrigerators together? Well, as I mentioned, that kind of makes sense. If all the PFAS component groups are the same, so the one has a anti smudge coating on the shelves, it has the same fluorinated blowing agent in the expanded foam, it's got PTFE as a flame retardant in the plastics, and it uses FEP wire. As long as they'll do that, or worst case do that, that's fine. You put them together. And it's a pretty common situation that different refrigerators are using the same types of PFAS containing components. And we often do the worst case. Imagine that this one has a little bit more because it's got a much bigger circuit board. It has a, not usually that much different, but has something a little bit different. This one has a fluorinated label on the hard drive in there, not the refrigerator hard drive. But the other one could, just depending which component it has. So we use the worst case scenario. Can you put refrigerators and refrigerator freezers together? Well, they're under basically the same umbrella custom code. They're both HS code 84. And you could describe them the same function, and they're the same PFAS containing components. They're like, oh, if you can do it like that, medical devices can be all put under one. No, they have to again be the same function, same PFAS. The reason the PFAS in your endoscope will be very different than your pump that you're using. You can't put them together. Their function of the device is quite different. So HS code is very useful for classification, very good for justification, and very good for description, but you still have to have the same PFAS component groups. You still have the same function. Refrigerators and freezers are all cooling appliances. They're all basically the same thing. And it makes sense you could put them together if the PFAS component group's the same. Otherwise, you have to report them differently. And if you have to pay a fee per report, you really want to group them. But if you only have to pay once to manufacture, then you can be a little bit looser on them. But no point making your life too difficult. How about freezers? Well, it's just another cooling appliance. You've already said refrigerators with freezers could be there. They're also HS code 84. As long as they have the same, it makes sense they can go with refrigerators, as long as, again, the components are the same. If you have different PFAS-containing components in the freezer, which would be odd because the refrigerator freezers should have the same ones in general, then they can't be grouped. So they have, as long as they meet all these criteria, and because you're not missing any data, you're still saying the same, what types of products, so they have information, what component groupings are in, so they have that kind of information. What PFAS, they're not missing anything because they don't have volumes anyway, so that doesn't really matter. They got, honestly, the product types, the PFAS containing components, what the PFAS that's in them, the concentration range, and the function, they're getting everything they want anyways. You're not, reduce data for them, which seems perfectly reasonable. Put the freezers in. Okay. How about ovens? Can we put ovens with freezers? If all the PFAS containing groups are the same? Well, at this point in time, same as I said with medical devices, they have a different HS code. Their functions are different. They're heating. You can't just say all large appliances have all the same PFAS, and the ovens won't even have the same components. They'll have high temperature components, which will have a few different PFASs than the low temperature ones will. So even if you had the same PFAS containing component types, you can't really put them together. I mean, it's at this point in time, you go, okay, they're not even the same customs code. That's not going to happen. So ovens, no. But you can probably put stovetops and ranges together if they, again, have the same components. If they don't, you just have to report the range is different than stovetops. What needs to describe the function? Because, again, you have to mention the PFAS containing component, the PFAS, and the function of that PFAS. That's not really clear in the legislation. Is it a one-word thing like anti-friction or flame retardant, or should you put more description? We're going to scour the statement of reasons a bit more, and then we're going to send some input in because the law doesn't say it. The notice doesn't say it. And realistically, to protect the use, you're going to want to put a little more than one words because if you're going to put, we're using FEP as insulation. Okay, it's really for high temperature wire insulation. It's got a real need. This is the high temperature because everybody's, it's just wire insulation. You can use PVC or polyethylene. Like all our other cables are PVC and polyethylene. You can use those. They can't survive the temperature of an oven or a router or, the inside of a laptop. They can't survive that heat. You have to use FEP or ETFE. So you need to state that in the function. So you're going to want to put a little more detail, and that's why we have this project going. When we do the Minnesota for everyone, we'll have the common functions we circulate. Again, it's a single word or term, which is not that advisable, but it is under TSCA. Why? But it is. You just go pull down. Sometimes they have other nonstick. Do I put it under lubricant? Is it one word like TSCA or a description with detail? It's not clear. but likely they want some detail. But a big long thing is not going to help anyone. And so the idea is we're working on standardizing those function descriptions. So our Claigan project, so if anybody does Minnesota PFAS with us, as part of the submission, companies will review standardized function descriptions for common PFAS containing components. And if we did Canada for you, or US TOSC, or anywhere else reportable, it's just very incremental in the work. Doing the Minnesota one, the data we've been giving you, whether you know it or not, is built for Minnesota. What we really like to do is standardize the function code so everybody's the same, and then we'll help you rearrange it, the proper grouping. But it's mostly a paperwork issue. We've done the work for you for other jurisdictions. We plan for Minnesota the whole time, and the data sets that way. And so the idea is also want to create common function descriptions. It's not to spend your money unnecessarily. And you'll find in the long run, it's so much better if you have a good, accurate, common description with everybody else. By the way, people are asking great questions in the chat about whether or not it's concentration at the component level or the article. They're both allowed. We do component, and the reason is it allows you to group components better because the concentration range in the component will be more consistent than it will be in the overall product. Fees, it's $1,000 per report, which the law says is per product grouping, which means every time you do different groupings, you spend $1,000 separately. But the statement of reason says it's a manufacturer. So that needs some clarification because the mechanics have it every time you do different product grouping, you spend $1,000. However, the statement of reasons is built, it should be $1,000 per manufacturer. And then if you do your own submission and a joint submission, it's $1,000 each. It doesn't, something doesn't work here. It's $300 to file an extension. And each year you have to update it with either an update or recertification for $500. Is it per manufacturer or per report? It's supposed to be per manufacturer. So we'll see. That's one of the things we have to submit. Yeah, it's a bit of a gap there. And I recommend everybody else. There's a consultation I'll have a link to later. Definitely recommend everybody else going, okay, you said manufacturer, but it says per report. Then you report, you say for a product. And if I have different products, which are product families, that's different reports, which means different fees. So that's not right. No, new products cannot be sold in Minnesota if they contain PFAS and they're not covered by a report. So the nice thing about if you do the right grouping is if you sell like a new refrigerator and you have a good refrigerator grouping, you're already covered. By the way, a lot of people ask which time period are we doing for 2024? It's intended to be, you can't sell without it. So it's really intended to be 2026 sales. No, you don't have to know volumes, but what you intend is to sell in 2026, but you're really building off 2025. You could argue two ways. It's intended to be the one going forward, or it's the one of the previous year, and you have a year next February to update it with that year. So if you do January 2026, you could argue it's my 2025 products, and then I can update in February 2026 for my 2026 products. But it's written to also be, it's to cover what you're going to sell the following year. So you really want to focus heavily on making sure it covers your stuff. When you report in January 2026, it covers your stuff you want to sell later in 2026 too. Because you can't sell it unless it's already covered by a report. You could argue probably you can wait till you do the extension update each year, but it's also, that's another not clear piece. An annual update is required by February 1st. So Jan 1st, the initial one, February 1st is the update of each year if declarable components have changed or new products are being offered not covered by a previous report. So if you didn't group it, so it's covered under there. If you do everything by listing every single UPC code, you can probably have to add those each year, which kind of sucks. That's why we tend to use customs codes a lot better, which makes product grouping critical. So product grouping is critical. So then each time you do an individual like new refrigerator, you've structured it so your refrigerators are covered as long as the PFAS components haven't changed. Otherwise, if you don't have to update it, then you have to recertify it. They both have a fee of $500. So you have to make sure February 1st you've updated everything or recertified it. Here are the new products in it, or we've removed this PFAS, or this new PFAS is added, or this new product grouping, or it's fine the way it is, we'll recertify. So you have to do that every year. And it's $500. Now it says per report. It's intended to be per manufacturer. There seems to be a disconnect here. Reporting waivers. Oh, by the way, a company or group of companies could apply for a waiver for reporting. They're like, what do you mean? I get a waiver for reporting? Yeah, if there's substantially equivalent public information available. They're like, great. You basically have to put, and there can't be undue burden to access it. You basically have to put everything Minnesota has in a public place and then point to it and still pay the fee. So you end up reporting anyways. So you can do everything Minnesota wants, put it on your website instead, and then register with Minnesota and point to it's on your website, but you still have to do everything. and you still have to pay the same fee. Waiver details, it's almost the same details submitting a report, what you submit to Minnesota, plus you have to have a public where you can point to all the things Minnesota wants. So you basically have to, you can submit to Minnesota all the details, or you can put the details in your website and then submit to Minnesota where they are on your website. I don't know why you do that, but the potential's there. Plus, you have to put, very similar details to submitting a report, location information equivalent. So everything that's not in your submission, where it is on your website or similar public place, and certification by the manufacturer the data is true. So basically, you have to do everything. If you can put someone in a public place, you can point to the public place instead of submitting it directly. Why you do that, I don't know. And you still put $1,000. Not sure why you necessarily do that, but the option's there. I guess if you put it up on your website and that's where you want to keep it, then you submit to Minnesota, go see your website. And it has all the details you want. And it has to be basically the same. You basically can have Minnesota PFAS declarations for your products, put on your website, and then submit to Minnesota where to find them on your website. That's allowed. Companies are required to provide due diligence to authorities if requested. So all the documentation it took to put this together, which a lot of times is a really good idea of a third party because we put everything in a really nice, tight bundle for you. It's really easy to provide it, including all related documentation. And you have to keep it for 5 years from that point at least, or it says 5 years to the point that PFAS in your product was still there. If you get rid of your PFAS, you don't have to keep it beyond that 5-year period. Does it go beyond 5 years? We don't think so. It's not well written. It looks like you have to keep the documentation for at least 5 years. Now, the current rules intend to be the final proposal. This is a proposal, and the companies can still comment. You can go to that hyperlink and comment, and definitely there's some good ones to comment about. Is it $1,000 per manufacturer per report? And can I put multiple products in it, groupings? Or is it the way it's written? It looks to be one product family per report, because that's not the way the cost breakdown works in the statement of reasons. The companies can still comment till May 21st. However, they intend to adopt the rule at the public meeting on May 22nd. It's a public meeting, and that's where they intend to adopt it. Where we can help. Okay, putting the data together. So imagine you have lots of data. We can help you with that, roll it into the groupings and the common functions. It's very good idea to have the same function as everybody else. If you have some data, this is very common for us. We have some, but not all. We can help integrate to fill the gaps. We do that. Or we have no data. We have good plans for that. And depending where you're at, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And of course, if we've done your Canadian or US stuff before, it's just a remodification. It's like one submission difference. It's very small little line item difference. Because we've set you up to do Minnesota the whole time. There basically is not a product type we have not done reporting for. I'm sure we've done lots for electronics and medical devices, and tons for apparel and gym equipment and furniture and cookware and packaging. It's amazing what we've handled. Laboratory equipment, huge varieties, consumer products galore, professional, industrial. And some of it probably surprises, something we haven't seen before, but we pretty well handled everything. And there's different plan depending who you are and what your products are. There's actually a little bit different plan to come to the answer. Going into the minutia for this, it's actually more scientific minutia than your day. Like, you're not worried about how many connectors you have with PTFE or FEP. Just you're worried that you have connectors with PTFE or FEP. That's what you need to know. And so that's the way we're going for. Or in some cases, could have it. You're saying, well, I have like different accessories to this product. It could have it. So they need to declare it, because most of these are not going to be regulated anyways. And the reason you want to report in a lot of ways, one, because you have to, but two is so if they report it, it's much harder for them to regulate it. Component product grouping, we'll build the component groups for you based on what everybody else is doing. With data. So we built the component groups together and put the data together, because the components will have most of the data, the PFAS, the function, the component type. And then we build the product groups, put your refrigerators together and how we group it together, and basically give you the package. So that is to give you the package report to Minnesota. And we build the submission, which is not that difficult. If we group the products and the components together, the submission itself all rolls together. Makes life a lot easier. Keynote, as part of the submission, included in the cost, we have a submission project with standardization of the functions and component descriptions with the industry. So we want to make it, if you're declaring PFAS in your components for the same reasons as everybody else, that we've standardized the accuracy and details about, so everybody's reporting the same thing. It just makes a life a lot easier. It'll also make advocacy so much easier in the future, where that you're talking about a few key bullet points and not like the weirdest long written descriptions that don't all agree. And not all of you are chemists. Like for my sins, I'm a chemist. It doesn't get me invited to a lot of parties for sure. And, oh, you're a chemist, you're gonna blow something up. I'm like, no, I really mostly my job is actually long, complicated names and naming conventions for things with lots of carbons in them. I know it's not very fun. Um, so a lot of people aren't chemists. We can handle a lot of the details and then put it back to everyone else and say, hey, does this cover what you're doing? Just to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're the leader of PFAS and products submitted to the UN, the only ones to do that. Derogations to the EU, lots of stuff to Canada, of course, Australia, where a lot of the new restrictions are coming, and the UK. By the way, a lot of your new restrictions this year are in Australia and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom basically did nothing other than party while everybody else's lockdown since Brexit. And then new government in, and they're finally implementing the things they promised to. So there are more. UK has been some of the has the newest restricted substance regulations we've seen. Otherwise, UK has done nothing. They've literally twiddled their fingers. EPA, we submitted the same sort of thing to EPA. We spearhead the original project with industry to do the currently unavoidable uses, which for Minnesota, Maine, where Minnesota is stating back and go, let's look what's in products first before we talk about what's unavoidable. And then we have a laboratory. We're a 17025 accredited laboratory. That's a huge part of our life. It also makes the consulting, the talkie-talkie work a lot better, where we can walkie-walkie, or we can actually walk the walk to go with the talk. We actually have the ability to look at things, which is a big difference. Again, the standardization project, anybody doing Minnesota will be able to, will standardize the general components description and PFAS functions. You're like, oh, this would be really expensive. It isn't. It's rolled into this submission project. It makes life easy. You get a lot more. It's because we do so much volume of it. You get a lot more out of a project. We're not, again, you'll see in a lot of things, we're a big fan of operational processes, not knitting. We're not a fan of knitting solutions together, because doing things the first time is painful. You also get the advantage of working with us, which do it, tens of times, hundreds of times, thousands of times, depending on what it is. Purposes, we want to be accurate. We want it standardized, and we want everybody to be like everyone else. If you're going to use, the reason you're using PTFE as a flame retardant or as a dielectric or whatever is for the same reason as everybody else. So why don't we take advantage of that and have the answers are all the same, and providing the best starting point for future advocacy. So it'd be a lot easier for you or your associations later to talk about the 3 or 4 component types or 6 that you really care about. You want to protect those. And you probably have other stakeholders in the company who don't have a lot of time for long, complicated words or knowing the difference between PTFE and FEP. They're like, well, one's Teflon. You're like, no, they're both Teflon. This is not helping the conversation. So you want to make it simple. We're like, we want to protect these 5 things, and these 5 points, and you can point the number of fingers you have, and that's also very helpful talking sometimes to upper management when you can be more solid and tangible like that. I want to talk about these 5 things, and instead of making them swim, now you can also talk about all the chemistry and make it hard, and they don't want to do it themselves, which is fair. But we're gonna try to make it simple. Now, I'm going to talk about New Mexico. Why I'm going to talk about New Mexico PFAS is a bonus is webinar talking about the other states. So the way the state legislation is working is they all agreed, New Mexico, California, Maine, and Minnesota, and New York, and Colorado, et cetera, to create the same law. However, when it hits their legislature, it doesn't necessarily come out the same way. New Mexico is a bit later to the game, which has also allowed them to learn about everybody else. So they published their new PFAS proposed law. They want to ban PFAS in 2032. That's a high level headline, but that's actually not what's happening. And PFAS reporting is 2027. You're like, oh, it's a 2027 problem. They actually have a lot more exemptions. There's a whole range of products that are out, and they exempt most fluoropolymers from the ban and reporting. And they exempt, and this is really important because this definition is a lot of the kernel of what you're going to see going forward on what's going to be regulated, where people say, oh, PFAS are being banned. No, they're not. It's not. That's old news. A product that contains fluoropolymers, so they intend to exempt a product that contains fluoropolymers consisting of polymeric substances for which the backbone of the polymer is either perfluoro or polyfluorinated carbon-only backbone or perfluorinated polyether backbone that is solid at standard temperature and pressure. Now, for most people, it means nothing. For me, it means a lot. It just told me 3 important things. I'm like, oh, goodness. So first about the products they're exempting. So they're exempting used products, medical devices, pharma, cooling and heating equipment, veterinarian products, Products for public health, environmental, water testing, motor vehicles, boats, planes, semiconductors, non-consumer electronics, and laboratory equipment, which is now exempted a huge amount of people. The products containing fluoropolymers with specific carbon backbones, which I'll talk about, energy generation equipment, and a bunch of other things. The key one here is that fluoropolymer one. They're saying these are not dangerous. Perfluorinated backbones are ones that are only carbon and fluorines. That's PTFE and FEP. Those are what normally called Teflon, which is still name branding. Can mean more things than just those two. But there's just carbon hydrogens. The difference in FEP, it's got that side chain. That side chain gives it flexibility, and that's why the wiring is FEP, and a lot of your solid is PTFE. It has to do with that little difference creates flexibility differences, and that's FEP, and they're both called Teflon in products. PVDF, so they're a combination of carbons, hydrogens, and fluorines. So that's a polyfluorinated. Might not mean a lot to you. But anyways, PVDF, it's polyfluorinated. Kynar, fairly common material. FKM, Viton, it's a polyfluorinated carbon-only backbone. ETFE, this is literally if polyethylene, which is the first half, that's the E, ethylene, had a child with PTFE, which is the TFE side. They had a child. Mommy was polyethylene, daddy is PTFE. It's ETFE. And that's a good portion of your high temperature wires there. It is a polyfluorinated carbon-only backbone. Solid polyether. Polyether means carbon, oxygen, carbon. That's PFA. That's a wire type. It is also a common laboratory beaker material. It's fairly chemical resistant. It's solid polyether. It has to be solid polyether. This doesn't include degreasing agents, which are gas or liquid polyether. They're not included. PFP lubricants, which are liquid polyether, don't count. It has to be solid at standard temperature. FFKM, Calres, is actually a solid polyether rubber. Their structures, if you look closely, you might go, hey, wait a minute, they're actually the same thing. PFA is a plastic polymer version, plastic structure. FKM is a rubber amorphous structure. So they're basically the same chemical formula with a different alignment of structure. These ones are not intended, and these are the polymer types that aren't expected to be regulated going forward. New Mexico is just the one little state. But this is where everything is going. These ones are being shuttled off in a different direction from these ones, the fluoroacrylics. So the fluoroacrylics is your waterproof coatings on fabric or on, went from plastic to paper, whatever. That's what this is. And that little running man at the top of the fluoro, it breaks off and creates the PFOA type family. It's very water repellent. Its replacement is basically pure acrylics or polyurethane. The pure acrylics is a very strong allergen. People will start being, well, they are more and more allergic to their raincoats, which is kind of a bad idea, and it's not nearly as waterproof. And especially when people in, police or military, you'd rather have the better waterproofing and the not being allergic to being in the same clothes for long periods of time. And fluorosilicone. Fluorosilicone is an accident. It really should be carbon or silicone only backbone. That's really feedback we should give New Mexico. It's basically the same thing. It's just silicon backbone instead of carbon. It's also pretty benign. You see mostly medical devices only, which is exempted here anyways. But the fluoroacrylics are the ones that are going to be more regulated, and they produce very small amounts of the more dangerous version of the PFOA family, et cetera. The top group, more and more, whether it's here, Canada, EU, definitely Canada, are moving in a path of not being regulated. They're more benign. PTFE is way safer than its replacements. The ones in the top groups, the perfluorinated, polyfluorinated, and solid polyether, are moving down a path of non-regulation. They're a lot safer and better functioning than their replacements. So to give you an idea where things are going. A reminder, again, plastic registry, consumer, we're the world leader. Don't forget, deadline for consumer products is September 29th. It's a big deal. This is not the easiest thing in the world to do. We're definitely the best in the world at it. You can just Google, Canadian Plastic Registry and we'll come up. Very, very, very good at it. I'm very biased, but we're actually very good at it. We also do life cycle analysis. The plastic registry infrastructure has given us this tremendous infrastructure. The hardest part of LCA, which is the material side, that is the hardest bit because the manufacturing side isn't that hard. Transportation is fairly straightforward. How many kilometers of each transportation mode does it take to get to the customer? Usually the average customer in the EU. Product use, how much energy does it use during whatever your target window is? Target window, for example, could be for a printer, 100 printed pages, for, say, test equipment, 1 million tests, for laptop, like a 5-year or 7-year life. You put a bucket around it. So whatever its energy use during that, because some products can go well beyond that. So you want to try to define it. And then the end of life, whether it's recycled or not. Recycling actually produces more carbon dioxide because you do something, you spend energy. A lot of it really just converts energy into carbon dioxide equivalent. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of standardization. There's a lot of way we do it. We have to reference everything, but it's very operational. Usually your LCA is actually just variations, the same work as everybody else's, because you use roughly the same materials, just different percentages. A lot of you use the same sort of amount of energy in manufacturing, same locations. That's just a number. Transportation, different, ratio of by air or by ship, but it's all just numbers. Product use, what's your energy consumption during it, and so on and so forth. So relatively straightforward. Um, and goes into carbon dioxide equivalents. You also can do sulfur dioxide and similar, but that's the main ones there. We have a significant advantage because we're a higher volume operation in terms of the way we handle things. Everything is a process flow. We're not knitting your LCA together. It's faster, it's more effective, it's more consistent. By doing a lot of volume, we've done a lot more comparison between different products, and it makes it so whatever yours is not, unless you've done something very positive or very negative to it, not out of order with everybody else's. We don't like hand carving or hand knitting. These sort of things. So huge advantage. If you're ever to do LCA, talk to us. Even if you don't go with us, we'll explain exactly what work we do, and it'll probably make your life a lot easier. Where we can help overall, and before we do Q&A, we can help you put the data together. The companies that have lots of data, we can help you. Some data definitely can fill out the gaps. No data, we can tell you how to do it. We can and do it for you. And there's a lot of ways to do it with representative products, which is way more efficient. And you want to merge what you can have what you've had to report in Canada already, what you can have to report federally in the US. You want to basically, if you're going to do one, we want whatever we're doing for Minnesota to be an additional variation of it, not a new project of its own. So we try to combine them all. And that's why anybody we've done projects for right now, a lot of the data, especially if you're on the testing side, which is more product based, you'll see the data set we're providing is actually for the Minnesota purpose. We're going to align the functions more, but the idea is there. So it's probably not a product we haven't done for PFAS. I'm sure somebody will pick out one, but we've done huge, huge variations of variety. Component product grouping, we can build the component groups, which everything's based on. And that's the technical part. With the data, it's technical. And build the product groups, and then create the submission for Minnesota. We can help you with any phase. We're really good at it. And again, anybody doing submission projects with us will have a standardization component, which is great. Where basically you get to see not each of those products, but what the different PFAS functions are, comment on it, and use standardized, agreed upon function and component descriptions, which is way better. So I'll get into questions now. And again, every in the afternoon, you get to benefit a little bit by, I play my afternoon webinar is a little more free and loose, definitely enjoyable. And you also have the feedback from the morning to tinker with things. There's so much data in there. It's always interesting, different interpretations, especially when you one like that where the law says this, but the document explains the intention says something, and the intention says something different. It's complicated. Can you clarify 2 points? I'm going to Q&A, by the way. How Minnesota PFAS reporting is different from Tosca, with a few examples. The data is totally different. So you report products, components, and the PFAS in them. So it's product family-based reporting in Minnesota. Tosca report chemical. So you report PTFE and how many of your products have PTFE. So it's chemical based. So it's almost like you're doing columns and rows, where in Minnesota reporting, here's my product, here's all the PFAS components in it and the PFAS details. Tosca is reporting PTFE, and then what your PTFE is used for, and then how many of your products, there's volume data, how many products per year had that PFAS in it. So it's different directionally. And then in Tosca, you merge the functions together where you say, hey, when we use PTFE in your product, it's 50% as a flame retardant, 25% anti-friction, 25% as a dielectric or whatever. It is quite structurally different. So we usually build the data originally on the Minnesota one, which is product-based, and then because it's easier to merge and convert to Tosca-based. If we submit Tosca report, do we still need to submit Minnesota? Yep, they're totally unrelated. State and federal, totally unrelated. You still have to do both. If you've done it really well, you can structure the data to do both, but they're totally unrelated. Products sold in Minnesota are in scope, but sold during what time period? That's not 100% clear. What we're doing it has to be reported so you can sell it. So if you report for January 1st, 2026, A lot of people interpret it to 2025 product base, but you really want to structure for your 2026 product base. Otherwise, if you have something new in 2026, you have to update it. So it's because you can't, it prevents you to sell unless it's reported. So it's a really forward looking. You really want to look for the next year's products. Technically, you can get by probably using the previous year's like 2025 data and then updating in February 2027. But you can't sell something unless it's covered in a report. And it's not clear how the updating timeline works with all that. So the forward looking is what we normally recommend. If we say concentration, what level? Is an article or assembly level? Great question. You can do it at the product level or at the component level. We normally do it at the component level because it creates standardization. The reason it's in your product is usually because of the component, unless your product is a component. So product and component are a lot grouping are a lot easier if we do the concentrations at the component level. So you basically say, hey, these are my refrigerators. I have PTFE, so flame retardant plastic component type, PTFE in it between 0.1 and 1% of the plastic, and then makes it so it's a lot easier to group things together. So we normally do it at the component level. Did Minnesota publish a list of PFAS substance and CAS numbers that need to be reported? Nope, and it's mostly meaningless. A lot of the main polymer chemistry is much harder that way, and a lot of the main PFAS do not actually have CAS numbers, especially if you do apparel. Is there a look back period for reporting? It's really you have to report it and continue to sell it. So it's really look forward. Is there a way to keep the PFAS CAS identities confidential if the business data is available to the public? Yes, there is a confidentiality section. You have to justify it. If you group the component function, so that's another reason when we group it and make it the same as everybody else. So it will normally be just the same as everybody else. And anybody's like lawyers talk about lawsuits. It has nothing to do with your products, for the most part. If you make food contacting paper, yes, that fluoroacrylic is not good news. But that's a bigger problem if you're downstream from the mill that makes it. Would product group make something like a watch and not actually a SKU or style? It depends. If your watches have PFAS for the same reasons, then you group them together. And it could be watches with fluoropolymer bands, because the Viton band would be a little bit different. It would have to have the same PFAS containing components. So you can do watch for sure. You just have to have the same PFAS containing components. If you have a grouping that has it as a dielectric and the one has a dielectric and Viton, because it has different, you have to separate those. So as long as the watches have the same PFAS containing component types, then yes, you can group them. What about Minnesota Bill 620 proposed delay reporting until January 1st, 2028? Well, if that goes through, sure. But the one we have today, and then we'll see when they report on May 22nd, and they adopt the rule, the final rule, that could change it then. But right now, the written one we're told to review says 2026. Yeah, laboratory equipment is exempt from New Mexico PFAS reporting. Yes. I missed that slide from Minnesota. Is laboratory exempt from Minnesota? No, everybody's in. New Mexico is different. Everybody's in for reporting from Minnesota, except for those handful of things like military equipment and such. When will Minnesota iron out the anomalies in the regulation? Hopefully not 5 minutes before the first reports do. Well, they're supposed to iron that out when they have the public meeting. I don't really know how you do it there on the 22nd. So we'll see. If I'm a manufacturer sells to a business, then puts the product in Minnesota, do I need to report as a manufacturer or is the responsibility of the customer? It's the responsibility of the brand owner if the brand owner is located in the United States, not just Minnesota. If the brand owner is not located in the United States, then it's the importer into the United States. However, you can make an agreement with your distributor to do it for you. They'll need technical data, but they have to choose to make that agreement. Otherwise, it's always the brand owner. You're like, what if I'm a component supplier and I put in somebody else's product and they bring it into the US or sell it? Well, it's under their brand, it's their problem. Now, if you've reported, say, the capacitor in it already, they can choose to ask you what your report is and then point to your report. That seems way more work than is needed. If we sell laptops and certain laptops use a fluoropolymer, which a few laptops don't use, in that case, can we still group them together? We often do it in a worst case if they could use it, or you can separate them, or if they have no fluoropolymers, then they don't have to be reported at all. So that will come down to fees a bit. So often for laptops, as long as they can, we do worst case. So some of the laptops, say, don't have a certain PTFE antenna. So they don't have PTFE dielectric. but most of them do. Over reporting, there's no comment either way. See, they don't want you to miss anything. So including the laptops, including the ones that don't have the PTFE antenna, because that's an accessory or only some of them have it. We normally say you can put them together as long as you declare the antenna, because you're not declaring volumes. You're not saying we're doing, 3,300 units. You're just seeing the product type. So reasonable over declaring seems perfectly reasonable. If you're not planning on selling PFAS containing product in Minnesota in 2026, do you have to report? Nope. It's really a looking forward thing. It just blocks your ability to sell. How are we supposed to know if new products yet to be added to our lineup have PFAS or not? You don't. So if you do create one, then you have to report it. You're not supposed to be able to sell it. It's not clear whether you can wait until the February update to add it. That's not clear, but you're not supposed to, in the law says you can't sell it unless if it's got PFAS in it, if it's not in one of your reports. So that's one of the reasons why we create product groupings to try to be accurate and encompassing enough to cover your new products you design, make it a lot easier. Can existing products of PFAS be sold in Minnesota without a PFAS report if they have PFAS in it, not after January 1st, 2026? Do electronic component manufacturers have to submit a report to Minnesota? Yes, if they're selling their components there, because that's under. Now, if you sell it, say, to a laptop, and the laptop manufacturer says you do, because they don't want it to report themselves, and they want to point to your report, they can force you to do it. But if they're the one putting the product on the market under their brand and the product's the laptop, then they're the one responsible for reporting. Now, if you sell components, under your brand, Acme connectors in Minnesota, then yes, if you report for those. So again, everybody register, receive a copy of the slides. And another good question. Does it stand for TOSCA report? Our reporting is based on the volumes of products imported. What about Minnesota PFAS reporting? Our reporting is based on volumes. There is no volume or numbers. It is completely product type, component with PFAS in it, and PFAS identity and PFAS function. There's no volumes in Minnesota. It's very different than TOSCA or the Canadian PFAS. They're looking for mostly what product types have what in it. We're not really caring how much right now. We want to know what we're looking at. Before we regulate, we want to know what's in there, because they want to say, hey, I want to ban PTFE. Oh, you can't sell it. You can't. Now you've destroyed everything. Like, okay, well, let's not do that. So one of the values of reporting, it makes it very difficult for them to restrict it. If all these companies report it, they're like, yeah, we can't restrict that. Or we have to really work hard to justify it. So reporting is very important. So again, everybody register, receive a copy of the slides. There will be a recording, probably this afternoon's one, even though I was talking a bit too fast, a lot too fast, way too fast. Sorry about that. But at least on the recording, you can slow it down. There's a little thing you can slow it down. Also, our website's got a bunch of new stuff on the YouTube. It's worth looking at. We got some 1.5-minute stuff on plastics registry and the new UK restrictions, where we have a big long one, but we have like one that's a 1.5 minutes. At least it points you in the right direction. Recommend it. They're also funny. We got to actually play a little bit with the Canadiana. We don't get to do that for a lot of regulations. We talk about maple syrup briefly in it. It's fantastic. But on our YouTube site, there's some really short ones too. If you want to see the plastic registry or the UK stuff, it's really, really good. And thanks again. And I look forward to hosting everyone again soon in the future.